Chicago, 1994. Long before the royal titles, the flashing cameras, or Hollywood fame, there existed a quiet story few have ever heard. One that Meghan Markle buried so completely that almost no trace of it survived. It began with a young man named Joe Giuliano. Not a prince, not a public figure, just an ordinary, grounded soul who believed in loyalty, faith, and the slow building of a shared life. Their love started fast, almost like sparks leaping from a match, and then, just as quickly, it was gone. No photographs, no lasting records, no witnesses who spoke. A whole marriage erased as if it had never happened. For decades, those who knew fragments of the truth kept their silence. Not out of fear alone, but out of a binding loyalty to a family's quiet promise. Yet silence has a half-life, and time always finds a way to whisper what was once buried. Now, nearly 3 decades later, those whispers are resurfacing again, fragment by fragment, revealing a lost chapter of Meghan's life she thought would never catch the light. It began not in palaces or with flashing headlines, but in the soft glow of a small Las Vegas chapel. No cameras, no crowd, no lavish ceremony. Just Meghan, Joe, and a minister who would barely recall their faces years later. The ceremony was quick, stripped of grandeur, more like a pause than a beginning. Joe believed that day marked the start of his forever. Meghan, on the other hand, seemed to see it as a small detour, something fleeting, something not meant to last. Within months, the echoes of that promise faded. What should have grown, trust, commitment, love, instead dissolved into quiet distance. Papers were signed, records disappeared. What once existed under the neon lights of Las Vegas became a rumor, a ghost of something that technically happened but couldn't be proven. And the question that still lingers is, why erase something so harmless? What could possibly be so important that truth itself needed to be buried? To understand the silence, you have to look at where Meghan stepped in. The Giuliano family wasn't wealthy or glamorous. They were old-school Italian-American, humble, devout, rooted in family customs that seldom bent. Sunday dinners, holiday prayers, secrets kept firmly within the home. That was their rhythm. To them, marriage wasn't an experiment. It was sacred permanence. When Meghan entered that world, she arrived like a gust of wind into a room filled with candlelight. Bright, ambitious, unpredictable, she talked about acting, traveling, the kind of success that demanded recognition. At first, the Giulianos saw it as youthful energy, but gradually, they sensed a restlessness that didn't fit their world. Her stories often changed slightly depending on who asked. Small inconsistencies that wouldn't matter to most, but stood out to a family that valued clarity and truth. Dates shifted, details blurred, even her age and graduation timelines seemed uncertain. Joe's parents were kind, not suspicious people, but they began to sense that Meghan's heart was not anchored in their world. She was already living somewhere else, in her mind, in her dreams. When Joe's mother asked gentle questions, Meghan would steer the talk toward auditions or Los Angeles, or the dreams she was chasing. She always knew how to shift attention, not through lies, but through charm. People believed her because she knew exactly how to make them want to. Bit by bit, the Giulianos realized Meghan wasn't trying to settle into their home. She was only passing through it. Joe's father, a quiet man of few words, once told him, "You can't hold on to someone who's already walking away." Joe didn't understand then. He would soon. As months passed, Meghan's visits to Los Angeles grew longer. She skipped family dinners, stopped calling as often, avoided holidays. Joe tried to balance his love for her with his loyalty to his parents, but even he couldn't ignore the growing gap. To his family, it was clear. Meghan didn't want roots. She wanted wings. She was chasing something intangible, something bigger than ordinary life. Her dreams had no room for stillness. But then came a turning point. Meghan reportedly discovered she was pregnant. What should have been joyful instead brought unease. The Giulianos valued family deeply, but they also valued stability and silence. A child might have tethered Meghan to a life she didn't want, or perhaps she feared it would stall the career that was only beginning to form in her imagination. No one knows exactly how the decision was made, only that it changed everything. According to family sources, there was no drama, no bitter argument, only a solemn agreement spoken quietly behind closed doors. The Giulianos would raise the baby. Meghan would move on, not in anger, not in guilt, but in quiet acceptance. To the family, it was both an act of love and protection. To Meghan, it was freedom. Months later, a baby girl reportedly arrived in the summer of 1995. Quietly, unannounced, her birth unrecorded under Meghan's name. At family gatherings, she was introduced as a relative's child. Her story was sealed by omission. Only those inside the Giuliano circle knew the truth, and none ever broke that silence. Joe remained nearby for a while, helping where he could, caught between lost love and silent duty. Meghan, meanwhile, moved forward, first to college, then auditions, then onto paths that would eventually lead her to royalty. In the Giuliano home, her absence echoed like a room left half-furnished. Neighbors remember that after the separation, the family became more withdrawn. They sold their home, disappeared from the neighborhood, and left no forwarding address. Some whispered they left the country to protect the child from growing up under the shadow of Meghan's rising fame. Over time, their story became local folklore, a rumor too strange to prove but too persistent to die. The Giulianos built their lives far from attention, possibly overseas. Joe never remarried publicly, and his name faded from any searchable record. The child grew up in privacy, her history invisible to the outside world. Then, decades later, fragments began to surface. Not in tabloids or gossip columns, but in quiet conversations from those who once knew the Giulianos. Someone reportedly said, "We didn't hide it to protect Meghan. We hid it to protect the child." That sentence alone reignited questions that had been silent for almost 30 years. Was there really a hidden daughter? Did the Giulianos truly vanish to protect her? Why did Joe sacrifice his own story for a silence that was never acknowledged? Every buried story leaves traces, faint echoes that never quite fade. Meghan's public life is now defined by global stages, royal duties, controversies, and reinventions. But behind that polished image lingers a chapter deliberately erased, a lost love, a vanished family, and a choice that still stirs in whispered recollections. What kind of family disappears overnight to guard a truth no one else remembers? What kind of man stays silent for 30 years as the woman he once held close becomes one of the most scrutinized figures in the world? And what truth could be powerful enough to bind a family to secrecy for a lifetime? Maybe one day the daughter will seek her origins. Maybe Joe will finally speak, or perhaps the silence will remain. Not out of fear, but respect for what was once held sacred. Because some stories, no matter how long they sleep, have a pulse. They wait for time to shift, for circumstances to allow them a voice again. And as Meghan continues to reinvent herself, moving from one world to another, actress, duchess, advocate, she carries a shadow that never entirely disappears. The Giuliano's silence may never break, but the echoes of that lost chapter remind us that the past has a way of finding light again, even after decades in the dark.